Well, a good welcome to everybody here. This is Sandhill Consultants, and my name is Jog Raj, and I'm one of the senior consultants here, and I'm going to be doing the presentation for you for this afternoon, or for the next 45 minutes or so. And obviously the presentation I've got here is one which is entitled Mind the Gap, and that's where we're going to be looking at how to go about aligning your business and IT so that they work together in a better way. And I think we've got a few people on board, and so I think we're going to make a start. First thing is, just to let you know, the presentation is being recorded, and it will become available after the event, so that if you want to rewatch it or you want to distribute it to others, you're certainly welcome to be able to do that. So the presentation and the recording will become available after the event in there. So we've got a short agenda here, and what we're going to do is have a quick look at some of the following items in here, and I'm just going to do a very short introduction as to what the presentation itself is about. The bulk of the content I'm going to be presenting is really going to be talking about how and why you want to align your IT systems in your IT departments with the capabilities of the enterprise, and we're going to, as I say, spend the bulk of the time looking at that. Now, at the end, yeah, we'll have a bit of a wrap up, and there will be questions and answers. I'm going to take questions and answers at the end, but obviously you're welcome to pose questions in the chat room. I'm not going to be able to answer those until the end, but I've got my colleague here, Sophie, and she'll be able to make a note of those questions. If she can answer those as she goes along or as we go along, she will try her best. If not, then I'll be prompted at the end so that we can have a question and answer session in there. And again, at the end, there will be some information for further follow-up actions and information if you want, and additional resources, and we'll just make you aware of those towards the end in there. So on that note, let's make a start here. So I know that this is a broadcast or a presentation which is going to go, it's potentially going to go to a lot of people in a lot of different countries, and not everybody happens to know the basis for why the mind the gap saying is something which is quite prevalent and known here in the UK. And basically it's to do with a situation which is present, as it were, under the underground of the London Underground system. And essentially what you've got there is the underground carriages. They're all obviously linked to one another, but the carriages themselves are obviously straight. And the platforms, however, can be curved. And that does mean that when the trains approach, whilst they can adapt to some degree to the curvature of the platform, there's always going to be some, not necessarily misalignment, but a gap between the train and the platform. And there's a well-known announcement that has always been made, which says, please mind the gap when alighting or alighting off the train. So it's quite well known, and what it did do is it made me think about these things, and essentially, you know, the gap itself there is the problem. You know, there is a misalignment between what the trains are able to do and what the platform itself can do, or how to get off on the train on there. And obviously, when you're a passenger and you want to get off, you have to assess how big is the gap, where is it, how high is it, and make a workaround around that. And part of the workaround is the fact that they give you an announcement, and then you obviously have to make sure that you get off the train safely. How do you fix that? Well, they've obviously worked around the problem by making the announcement and telling people. But you know, the actual fix of the problem is to align the platform and make sure that the platform itself is straight, and make sure that it all works together in that way. However, that may not always be the case, and so people do have to work around. And if we take that analogy with what we're looking at in terms of IT systems and the enterprise itself, we have a similar situation where IT, for whatever reasons, aren't able to actually deliver on the promises that he has to the business, and to deliver fully on the goals and the mission, etc., that that the business wants to achieve. And obviously, it does mean that we've got to work around that in some way. However, it shouldn't really be like that. It shouldn't be a case of the fact that the IT system is not aligned with the needs of the enterprise. I mean, you don't very often hear, oh, the HR system or the HR organizational unit department isn't aligned with the needs of the business, or the training department isn't, or the security department isn't. And that's because those departments are an integral part of the business itself. You don't really distinguish between those. I mean, they are all organized in a sort of organizational aspect, you refer to them, but they are an intrinsic part of the enterprise. And part of the issue for IT and business has really come about because of the fact that management treat and classify projects, and they treat IT as a separate entity, and they treat IT projects as IT projects rather than as a business project itself. And so straight from the beginning, it creates a segregation in the business from the beginning, and IT projects are treated separately, and it shouldn't really be like that. It should be a case of all projects are actually business projects. It's just that they happen to have, in our instance, an IT element to it in that way. And this way of thinking really does indicate poor or rigid IT leadership and business leadership that doesn't really put the right focus on the business problems. And so the solution is not to stop implementing projects that require the IT expertise, but instead what should happen is the IT leadership should really be enforcing the business strategy behind any project. And it should really be a case that we shouldn't be led by IT leaders. There should really be business leaders who have an understanding of the IT solutions and the IT capabilities. So it's really a business leader first and a technical specialist second that should really be filling in these roles in here. And that's what we're going to be looking at really, is how can we actually align the business towards the needs of the enterprise itself. Ideally, as I say, there shouldn't really be a segregation or a differentiation between them. It should be one and the same. But that's a slightly different subject matter, how you integrate them completely. Yeah. And so what we're going to do is really, as I say, look at how we can align the IT with the enterprise in there. And again, as I say, this is a work around the problem in that we're trying to have a closer alignment and integrate rather than an integration in there. And that's what we're trying to say here, is that, yeah, we're trying to have something instead of lots of different moving components to it, to eliminate those so it operates smoother. So how are we actually going to do this? What are the steps that we're going to follow in here? And one of the biggest things, and one of the most critical factors in this, which we've already mentioned a little bit, is the fact that the IT needs to be led by the business, and IT needs to understand what the business needs are. And that actually means that it's the business goals and the business objectives and the accomplishments that the enterprise or the business is actually trying to realize that is important to understand. And that's the why part. Why is the business doing what it's doing? And does the rest of the organization, the IT people included, understand what it is that they're trying to achieve? So making sure that they actually understand the why. And once you understand that, then you can adopt particular courses of action or adopt particular strategies and tactics to help you to achieve and deliver on the goals and objectives of the business in there. So it's very, very important to understand why, what it is that you're trying to achieve. And I don't mean that just, from the IT systems or the IT perspective. It's actually from the business, making sure that, that we actually understand that in there. And once you have that understanding, then of course you can prioritize out of those particular objectives and the requirements. Well, which ones are the important ones and which ones are the nice to have ones? Yeah. So being able to prioritize those and understand those and plan for those and how they manifest themselves as IT projects and deliverables. And how do we actually marry up the two? How do we get the IT systems to understand or to be aligned with satisfying and delivering to the goals and the objectives of the business? Well, we need to be able to understand what the existing IT environment is capable of doing, and to assess its capabilities and map those to the enterprise to identify gaps within there. And that means having to be able to understand not just the IT infrastructure, but the applications and the business systems and everything, and essentially the capabilities of the IT systems to be able to deliver to the enterprise's needs. And once we have an understanding of that, then we're in a position to be able to work out what's the gap between what the IT systems can do and what the business itself requires in there. Now, obviously, people are doing this to some degree already and practicing it. But one of the things that we have found is certainly that it requires some sort of repeated or repeatable process that people can follow. And the advantage of having that is that it's something that can be repeated, it can be measured against, it's something which is known and people can follow. And so having a structured, repeatable approach means that we can actually align what investments we want, and we can go back and say, well, this was the intention of the project, of what it was intended to implement, and this is what we've actually achieved. So you can go back and actually measure against what you've managed to achieve in there. And that means that it's repeatable and reusable in there. And that's what we're going to look at, is also what sort of structured approach can we use to help us to develop an approach that enables the IT systems and the IT organizational units to be able to deliver to the needs of the business in there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to follow a sort of a standard or a structured approach here. And so there's a little bit of a flow that I've got set up here. And what we're particularly interested in doing is, first of all, as I was saying, is really being able to understand what the intent of the enterprise is. And by the intent of the enterprise, that means being in a position to understand what's its long-term vision, what are its goals and objectives, what's driving the business. And those drivers can indeed be external ones from the marketplace, they can be internal ones. Again, there could be external regulatory ones, where we've got to make sure that we show compliance with external regulatory forces in there. And so that's the why part. Why is the business trying to achieve what it's trying to do? The next step in the structured approach is really being able to understand what assets we've got. And by assets, I don't actually mean the sort of hardware and the physical things. It's the broader sets of capabilities that the enterprise or the business itself needs to have. What should it be able to do, and how does the IT system support that? And as part of the IT systems, we need to be able to understand what applications we've got and how they all come together to provide some sort of business system in there. And how does that business system itself get supported? Well, there's an IT infrastructure which sits there. So that's your networks, the operating systems, and your hardware and your servers, etc. You may also be interested in knowing what are the processes that people follow, because you might have the best IT systems and everything else in there, but there might be poor processes that people are following, which impact the ability of the enterprise to deliver to achieve the goals and objectives that it has. And of course, all of these capabilities, the systems, infrastructure and processes, they have interrelationships and interdependencies. And we need to be able to understand those as well. So if we want to measure what the gap is between what our intent is and what we're actually currently able to do, well, we need some data for those assets. And so the data itself might be performance metrics. How often does this system fail? How quickly does it respond? How well does it manage in extreme workloads? How well satisfied are the end users with the functionality in here? So we can have a number of different performance metrics and technical characteristics as well. But also, we mustn't forget, the financial data. How much do these systems cost currently, and what will they cost in the future? Because we need all that sort of information so that we can make assessments on where we want to make the investments for the future. Once we have an understanding of those assets, plus their relationships and key data for those assets, we're able to go along and look at each one of those capabilities or the application systems and the IT systems that we've got and assess those individually and analyze those collectively as well. So that if I can understand I've got a number of capabilities which are supported by these application systems, how much is all that costing? How well does it perform to the needs of the business? Yeah. And what are our priorities? Where do we actually want to invest in there? So we can do some analyses, and we can do prioritization. And in order to be able to determine what the gap is, again, between what your capabilities are, i.e. what you are currently able to do, between what the business itself wants you to do, then we can perform a gap analysis. And there are a number of different visualizations of graphs and reports and analyses that you can perform to help us to understand those gaps in there. And then finally, architecting the solution. Now, that's an item which is beyond the scope of this presentation, and that's really concerned with how to go about determining and proposing the solutions, and then actually go along and building those. And so what we're going to be doing is we're really going to be focusing on the first 5 key steps in this structured approach in here. So how do we actually go about understanding what the intent of the enterprise is? Well, one of the first things that we need to do is to understand the drivers, what's driving the business itself. And so business drivers such as, customers, as an example here, customers want online capabilities. Customer satisfaction or dissatisfaction might be a key driver for us, yeah? Then what are the goals? Well, we want to have a platform here which enables us to provide digital services here. We want a goal which says to improve the claims handling process, yeah? We want to have an online platform, etc. So we can define what the goals are in response to those particular drivers that we've identified in there. Well, what capabilities do we have? Well, these boxes here represent the capabilities that we want to develop. And the capabilities are really ways of looking at what the enterprise and the business is able to do independent of what IT systems and organizational structures and abilities that they have. Yeah. And then associated with those claim management capabilities here is what's the course of action or the strategy and tactics that we're going to adopt in order to be able to affect the ability or the capabilities that we have in here. And again, in all of this, again, we want to be able to have measurements for not only how are we performing at the moment, but also where we would like to be at some point in time in the future. Yeah? So being able to have and define what the performance metrics are will also be key to our understanding and developing in this. Now, as I was saying, not only do these key things that we have here, not only is it important to have them and understand them, but also what their relationships are. So the business drivers drive the goals. The goals may be linked in with other goals, yeah, that we're trying to satisfy. The capabilities here are satisfied, or they realize these particular goals that we're trying to achieve. Yeah? And the courses of action that we have, they influence and design or develop the capabilities that we're looking to develop in here. So how do we go about doing this? Yeah. Well, one of the first things that we actually want to do is to be able to define what the business or the enterprise itself is able to do. And we're going to do this by using what we call capabilities. Yeah? So building up capability models. And these provide a way, a unique way really, of being able to define what it is that the business is wanting to achieve a specific outcome. Yeah? And so the capabilities themselves, they describe the ability of an organization to fulfill its business model or its mission in there. Yeah. And they can be subdivided, and there's an example of these on the right-hand side in here. And the great advantage of having these capability models is that it's a way of being able to speak with the executives and the business to be able to say, well, this is what your business is looking to achieve, and then link these into the underlying IT systems and the infrastructure that we've got to be able to deliver to those particular capabilities. But in the first instance, when we're engaging with the executives, the capability models provide a framework which is independent of the systems. And also, it can be used as a way of performing or defining the contracts that we want in there. Now, what's it got to do, and how well has it got to do that? So being able to define those performance metrics in there. and we can use that with management, to view any specific issues that we've got, make assessments, and also prioritize which areas that we want to focus in. So capability modeling is something which is available as a technique and is well practiced, and there's lots of information out there on how to build capability models. So once we've got an understanding of the capabilities, we also want to catalog what actually have we got in terms of the IT systems, the business systems to support the enterprise, yeah? And so we want to have a catalog of those, yeah? And we want to be able to understand what we've got, yeah, what plans we've got, what roadmaps we've got, and other information about them. What's our future intention for those? What policies and stands have we got? How are they dependent upon the other applications and the underlying infrastructure in there? So building up a portfolio of your applications is very key to be able to understand what they're capable of doing, and also how well they are performing and meeting the needs of the enterprise. But obviously also we want to be able to understand what's the hardware and the IT systems that we've got and the operating systems, and how well do they support the needs of the business in there, how well do they perform, and again also being able to understand what the dependencies are between those. And once we have that information, it's not just enough to be able to say, well, have a catalog of those, but we also need to be able to understand what their relationships are. So earlier on, if you remember, we started off to looking at, well, what are the goals that we've got, what capabilities satisfy those particular goals. But for those capabilities, what applications support those, yeah? And for those applications, what underlying IT systems support that. And the reason we want to be able to do this is so that we can perform analyses and determine the dependencies on those, and therefore work out what areas need improving, where the downfalls are, and what areas we need to focus on in order to be able to deliver to satisfy the particular business goals that we have in here. And all of this, yeah, obviously you can do this in Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoint and Word, but life is a lot easier if you're using some sort of structured, organized approach, and also some sort of tooling to be able to enable you to do this quickly and effectively. So not only do we want that information about the assets that we've got and catalog those, but we also want to be in a position where we can get performance metrics and technical characteristics and financial data of the capabilities, the applications, and the infrastructure that we've got in there. And again, it can be something which you can use out of the box, which might be provided by a tool, or you can have your own custom built sets of data that you want to use. And every perspective that you've got, whether it be the application capabilities or technology, will have different levels of information that you need to know. But it also depends, well, it all depends on really what your areas of focus are as the type of information that you're trying to capture and store in any particular tool in there. Once we've got an understanding of the capabilities, the underlying IT systems, and everything else that we've got in there, we can start making some sort of assessments against those, yeah. And we can also do, I guess, some of the information that we're capturing is going to be quite subjective, yeah. And there might also be a need to have objective information in here. And so you can do calculations and things which, say, for example, you want to do some sort of formulate calculations of the technical suitabilities here. So in this example, we're taking a technical debt and a technology debt and a technical maturity model, and we're performing some sort of calculations on those in order to arrive at a new determined value in here. Yeah. But either way, what we're trying to do is score the assets that we've got, and we can take different aspects in there. Now, this is just an example of this. I'm not saying that this is the only one aspect that you're going to be scoring on, but it's an example of the fact that you can have lots of different ways of scoring the assets that you've got, all depending upon what particular focus or area of focus it is that you're trying to do, whether it be a cost reduction or a performance improvement, depending, as I say, what type of aspect it is that you're looking to improve upon. So if we have an understanding of our capabilities and an understanding of our IT systems and the applications that we've got a sort of foundation on where we can start assessing what it is that we've got and where we want to be, and then being able to work out the gaps and how we're going to get there. But one of the first areas that we want to start looking at is really, well, I know we've got our capabilities, but which capabilities should we really be focusing on? Now remember that we've just gone in, we've taken a look at those capabilities, and we've done some, well, we've got some metrics against those, you know, whether they are financial or performance or technical measurements of those. And we can start using those to help us to prioritize the areas that we should be focusing on. So if we go back and take a look at each one of our capabilities, and here's a sort of a Boston grid type of analysis that we can perform. And what this is doing is saying, well, let's take a look at the degree of financial impact that those particular capabilities have, yeah, as one dimension on here. And the second dimension would be how much value do those capabilities add to the enterprise. And so if we do that, we get a sort of graph which we can start looking at. And in the graph, the distribution in there will be of the capabilities, which will fall anywhere along this area. And if they fall along in this particular top right-hand area, then we can assess those capabilities and classify those and saying, well, actually, you know, they have a great financial impact and they're of great strategic value. So they provide great advantage to us, yeah? Whereas any capabilities over here, well, they have some financial impact, but they provide great strategic value, yeah? So an example of that would be, you know, single sign-on into applications. So that's greatly valued by customers, but really doesn't cost too much, and there's no financial impact in there. So in that way, we can take a look and assess each one of those capabilities and start using those as a way of prioritizing where we want to invest and focus our efforts. So if we've done that, if we've gone through our capabilities, we start prioritizing those, it means that we can now start looking at the capabilities that we've got. So here's the advantage capabilities, here's the essential, here's the necessary. But remember when we were creating the assets and cataloging those and looking at their interdependencies, we've got these interdependencies, we've got their relationships in there. So we've got our business processes here, which are supporting each of these types or classifications of capabilities. We've got the underlying applications, again, which are supporting the capabilities and the infrastructure in there. So where do we want to focus? Well, you might actually want to start focusing on those capabilities which provide the great advantage. Yeah? And in that case, what we should be doing is then focusing and looking at those business processes, those applications, and the underlying infrastructure which enables us to support that particular capability in there. So we can prioritize our efforts by looking at those particular capabilities or sets of capabilities that are, in our example here, providing the greatest strategic advantage for us here. So it's prioritizing our effort rather than just simply going in and saying, yeah, absolutely, that everything is what we want to look at. So if we've got a high-level focus area, yeah, that means that those capabilities that we've got, so again, we've got a capability map here which is showing a number of different capabilities in there. Yeah? And if we start looking at those, and remember again, we've got information which we've captured about the capabilities and about the underlying systems that we've got in there, we can start overlaying that with the underlying applications and have heat maps against those, yeah? And that enables us to start looking at those capabilities that we've got which have been prioritized and trying to understand which of those have got any issues or gaps in there. So some of the questions we can start asking is, like in a heat map, is saying, well, what capabilities have we got that have been scored or assessed as being underperforming in the marketplace? And so we can highlight those with a red icon in there. Which ones are absolutely critical to the business? Well, you know, here we are, we've got those highlighted again. Which capabilities are affected by poor process performance? Well, what we're doing there is we're looking at the capabilities and their link to the underlying processes And if we've categorized any processes which are poor performing ones, then it's highlighting the capability in there. Similarly, have we got any capabilities which are affected by low quality applications? Yeah. So again, we're looking at the capability and its relationship to the underlying IT systems. And if those have been classified as being low quality or low performance, yeah, we're highlighting the fact that that particular capability is suspect, and it's got some sort of issues in there. So we're using the capability models as a way of focusing in on the areas that are of particular interest to us in here. So we've got this view, yeah, we can start looking at the capability and the underlying IT systems and the underlying applications that we've got, and going into that in a more of a deep dive to find out the root cause analysis and the areas which really should be the ones that we're looking at to help us to improve the IT systems in there. And so there's a number of different ways that we can do this. We can start looking at bar charts in here, stacked bar charts over here, scorecards, yeah, heat maps and pivot tables or scatter diagrams. So there's a number of different ways that we can look at this. So what we're going to do is, now that we've identified from our capabilities what applications are possibly giving us cause for concern. Now, remember, again, we've got scores against each one of our applications, and what we can start doing with those is starting to assess those. And again, we can apply something like an application assessment matrix on those, yeah? So if I've got a score which looks at the technical quality of an application and how much business value that particular application provides for us, then again, we can have this sort of scatter diagram or a spread, well, a 2D spread of, or a distribution of those applications, and we can look at those and we can say, well, actually, you know, what is it that we want to do with the applications in there? So if we've got applications which are well built, yeah, provide high business value, well, they're the ones that we should really be investing in. Yeah, they are the strategic ones that we should really be investing in. However, if we've got some which provide low business value and high technical quality, I think high technical quality, maybe those are the ones we should be re-engineering. If they fall over here, maybe they should be, you know, tolerated or divested. So depending on where they actually fit in here, can help us to assess what we're actually going to do with each one of those applications in there. So this is where the tools actually come in and are very helpful for us, in the respect that we can take those measurements that we had against the applications. Remember the business suitability index that we've got, the technical suitability index that we've got in here. And I think I've mixed up the axes here, but this is the correct one. This should be the technical suitability index and the business suitability index in here. And if we take a look at that, so anything that falls over here is well built but doesn't meet the needs of the business so well. So we'll just put up with those, we'll tolerate those, yeah, because obviously they're providing some value to the enterprise. Those which have high business suitability fall over here, and they're well built, so we want to retain those and invest in those. Anything which is over here, which meets the needs of the business, but they haven't been built so well, means that they should really be re-engineered, so they should be re-platformed and moved over into the investment area in here. Whereas anything which falls over here, maybe they don't really meet the needs of the business, they haven't been well built, we should divest those, get rid of those and replace those with something else in there. And so in a way, what we're really doing here is we're saying anything that falls over here should be re-engineered. So there is a gap between that capability over here and the needs of the enterprise. They should be pushed over here, and so we should be investing in those. Yeah. So again, this type of matrix enables us to look at the applications that we've got and perform some gap analyses and help us to make some choices as to which applications we should really be focusing on, which support the particular capabilities that support the business objectives that we're interested in. So when we're looking at this, we're not looking at the applications in complete and utter isolation of what the business is requiring, but we're looking at them to see how they support the capabilities and how those capabilities support the business objectives and goals that we're looking to achieve. There are other alternative ways or complementary ways of getting the same sort of information in here. So rather than having very detailed assessments of the applications, we can do a slightly more subjective assessment. You know, what's the functional quality like? What's the technical quality like? What's the health status of those? And again, if we've got any applications which are poor, yeah, maybe if we decide they are the ones that we want to invest in, well, here's the degree of the gap or the amount of improvement that we need to add into those applications in there. So again, using these graphical ways to help us to understand which applications and the degree of investment that's required in here. We can also use other types of reports in here. So for example, we've got an affinity analysis here. And this is basically a pivot table that we've created. And what this enables us to do is to look at the capabilities and the applications which support those, yeah? So if this particular application happens to be used by 3 capabilities, which is saying that there's a greater danger that we're going to impact the rest or other parts of the business if we start meddling with a particular application. On the other hand, for claim management, there's a large number of applications which support this. So if we really want to improve that, well, there's quite a large number of applications that we have to go and look at. Yeah. So getting that type of affinity analysis in there. So if we've now managed to examine and look at the applications in detail, yeah, what we've done so far is said, okay, we're looking at the advantage capabilities, yeah. We've, from there, managed to identify the specific capabilities that we are interested in. For those specific capabilities, we're looking in and focusing on the specific applications which support those capabilities in there. We can now start looking at their life cycles. You know, are these applications actually currently in use? You know, what are the roadmaps for those? Yeah. So there's some which are going to be coming online, some which are going to come to the end of the life at a particular period in time. And again, for each one of those applications, we can start overlaying those with some assessment scores again. So in this example, these assessments are saying, well, have we got any applications in here which have a high functional requirements in here? Have we got any critical business applications? Have we got any applications which have a low quality performance in there? Yeah. And so again, we can focus in on those. So by going from the capability to the applications, we can see which applications we need to really be focusing on and hone in on those which are providing issues or identifying issues which are of specific interest or of particular relevance to us in there. And once we've got these, then it's a case of, right, we know the applications. The next big question really becomes, well, what do we actually want to do with those applications? You know, do we actually want to go in and invest in those? Are we going to re-platform those? Do we want to disinvest in those? Yeah. How are we going to enable us to do improve the business and align these applications better to fulfilling the needs of the business? And that involves architecting and building the solutions, yeah. But that's really beyond and outside of the scope of the presentation that I had in here, because the priorities really are, the first setting here is to identify capabilities, identify those capabilities or the applications which support those, and the gaps and the degree of the gap and the problem areas that we really need to focus in on. And solutioning those and building the solutions to overcome that, as I say, is a different set of perspectives that we need to look at in there. So what have we done? What we've managed to do here is we've taken a look where we've said what we should really be doing is focusing in on the priorities, yeah, and those priorities are driven by prioritized assessments of the capabilities that we've got, yeah. We're using objective analyses rather than a gut feeling, oh yeah, this area is what we should be looking at, or we think it's the processes which are poor in here. So rather than having a gut feel, yeah, we're using, I guess, repeatable analyses that we can perform and use those as a proof of being able to prove deficient areas in there. And a point that I've made in here is obviously you can do all of this using you know, your spreadsheets and your calculators and other documents. But obviously, if you've got some sort of tools to help you, well, that will be much better in there. And again, adopting a structured and repeatable approach where you can, first of all, understand what it is the enterprise is doing, yeah, understanding and cataloging all your assets in there, gathering key data for your assets, yeah, analyzing those, performing a gap analysis, and based on that gap analysis, making recommendations for architecting specific solutions in there. So that is a repeatable, structured approach, you know, that we should really be following in here. And I started off with a small part of the presentation where I said, yeah, we've got lots of functioning parts of your IT systems in here. And what we're looking to do is to better align those to meet the needs of the business. So we're improving and having a better degree of alignment. But really, you know, what it should be is not just this. It should really be a case of where IT and the enterprise aren't just aligned, they become one and the same, yeah. And so what we're really looking to do is to say, well, you know, not just that, but it should really be a case of being one and the same. Just in the same way that we don't really differentiate the organizational units, and we don't differentiate any other organizational units of the enterprise. They are the one and the same. They are the business in there. You can't sort of take one away from the business and expect the business or the enterprise to function without it. So there's a lot of people out there that understand this, but find it difficult to actually get to there. But there have obviously people who understand this, and for those, as I was saying earlier, it's a case of the fact that it's the IT leaders aren't just IT leaders, they're first and foremost business leaders who happen to have a technical hat on or a technical capability and realize and appreciate the fact that this is how IT can help the business to achieve its particular needs. Yeah. And yeah, to be able to get from where we are here to that point, yeah, that's another webinar at some point in time in the future in there. So I hope you found my presentation useful and of interest in here. And that yeah, brings us up to what, about 17 minutes to the hour, which is about how long I thought it would take in here. And I think Sophie should be still on the line with us. And Sophie, if you've got any questions which people have been asking, now's the time to let me know. And if you could also open up the lines in case people actually want to ask questions directly.
Okay, I don't have any questions come in, but hold on and I'll unmute people.
Yeah.
Okay, people should be able to call in now.
Okay, we'll give people a few seconds just to speak their minds, and don't be shy. Whilst we are waiting for that, one of the questions I have been asked in the past is that people have often said to me is, you know, what do you think are the primary challenges and opportunities for aligning the business and the IT? And one of the biggest things which I've said in here is that it's really for the enterprise to understand, or rather the business to understand what IT is capable of. And it's very important for IT to understand what the business itself needs. And they become a sort of like a complementary circle where one feeds into the other. You know, if business understands what IT is capable of doing and IT knows what the business wants, then they can feed each other and have a circle, a virtuous circle, which provides positive feedback and enables people to be able to develop the IT systems to meet the needs of the business. Therefore, the business has greater faith in IT, and it's more likely to go back and use it in there. And so it's very important that the IT people understand why the business is trying to achieve what it's trying to achieve in there. So yeah, that's one of the questions I've been asked in the past. Okay, I don't think we've got any further questions coming along in here, but what I was going to say is, again, is the fact that the presentation and the recording of the presentation is going to be made available after the event, and I think you'll be able to contact Sophie, or it'll be posted up in there as a follow-up. In the meantime, if you need further information, there are websites which are available online that you can go to get further information, or indeed you can send us an email at info@sandhill.co.uk, and we'll respond as soon as we receive your requests. So on that note, I'm going to go quiet and close the presentation. And before I do that, thank you for everybody that attended, and we hope you found it useful.